These kind of events are among the hardest for us to discuss and put into a shape so that we can carry on the struggle and do it in a way as best as possible. They tend to put us on a defensive. And why is that? It's because when it happens, it's really what Larry already mentioned, but it bears a lot of repetition. The state comes into play, the big bourgeois capitalist state, and their media, which is almost like part of the state, although it's not completely under the, it's not completely taking orders from the government, but there really is sort of a section of the media that follows what the government says, and then there's another section that's worse. So that when the event takes place, no matter what actually happened, they determine what happens and what everybody believes, what 99% of the people believe. Or, I mean, there's always some percent of the people who won't believe anything about anybody and think the Freemasons did it or something like that. But aside from that, most of the people are going to believe what comes out of the big bourgeois media and the government. So that is what we have to deal with no matter what happened. So I don't expect to be able tonight to lay everything out line by line as to what happened and who did it and why and stuff like that. But we have to deal with the things as they are, the state having control of the information and control of what's going on. And even though we know that they too have to find out who did it and why and stuff like that for their own reasons, that may not be what we are, all that we get to learn all about that. And no matter what they say, there are going to be sections of the ruling class who try to do with it what they will. I'll give you the last big thing, bigger than this, that happened of the same nature, was the attack on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon in 2001, and it was blamed on a group of mainly Saudi people, but it was used by the Bush administration to make war in Iraq, who, had nothing to do with the Saudis. They used it for what they wanted, and they'll use it just like there was a senator today who said, oh, these are immigrants. Well, this is going to be part of the immigration debate. Now, does that there being immigrants have anything to do with it? They certainly didn't come across the border in the Rio Grande or the California border or whatever. But nevertheless, they take it and try to do with it. And that's what we have. That's what we're dealing with. Now, there's more or less today, more than there was a couple of days ago when we wrote the editorial, there is an official story. Apparently two young men, or two people anyway, put bombs that were made out of pressure cookers, loaded with things, at the Boston Marathon, which doesn't seem to me to be a particularly interesting target of the political target, and it blew up and killed 3 people and injured badly about 25 others, and injured another 150 people, not as bad. Okay. Something happened. Actually, I know somebody in Boston whose granddaughter went to school with the little boy who was in the same school with the little boy who got killed, and his mother was the librarian there. Okay, so you get these connections, and everybody in the country is mourning for the people who are the victims of the bombing and feeling terrible that it happens. And it is allowed, as Larry said, the state apparatus to jump in much stronger than you ever see them do, even when there's a serial killer or somebody who goes in and shoots up the school like they did in Newton, Connecticut a couple of months ago. It wasn't like they sent in the army after them, but over here you have entire Boston, as of a few hours ago, I don't know if it still is, but was locked down. Even though the gunfight was in a suburb 10 miles out of the the center of the city, and people are wondering what's happened, but everybody goes along with it. So they're doing a dress rehearsal or a run-through because the state apparatus has the opportunity to do it and has more or less the support of the population because everybody's afraid. And they're worried and they want to get this guy caught and get it over with. But just think, what I want to do is give a few things that show what this is as compared to something else. Because, for instance, because all the media goes along with this, of course. Imagine the money that it costs and the business that's lost in Boston. What if there was a strike of the subways and the train service and the teachers, say, and they shut down Boston for a day? God, you would not hear the end of it. The whole bourgeois media would be saying about how they have destroying the economy and hurting everybody and doing this and doing that. But no, they can let them get away with it. Okay, that's something I want to show. Also, from the point of view of suffering and damage, there was an accident this week in Texas. This accident it was in a small town, which was just as well, I guess, but it was in a small town so that something like 5 to 15 people got killed and many hurt, but the whole town got blown up. It was a fertilizer plant, so that's what explosives are made out of too. And the whole thing, a much, much bigger explosion, and if they spent 1/10 the money that they're spending to police Boston right now on giving it to OSHA to hire people who go around and examine plants, probably 4,500 workers a year get killed in accidents. And if you interviewed each of the relatives of the people who got killed in these accidents and put it on television, you could have the whole country mourning about them too, just like you do. I'm not saying don't mourn for the people in Boston. They suffered too, and they shouldn't have been killed. But just to put it in a picture of the class character of it and how the state is using it. Okay. Now, the two people, one of the comrades, I think Gary, was send around something, but that's supposed to tell you they had somebody gathered everything about the lives of these two people. So I went through, since I'm doing this report tonight, and I read everything, and I could not find out very much from it. Actually, is that told me, oh, that's why they did it, or there's nothing that speaks in their story that says, oh, yes, that's why today or 3 days ago they went out and blew something up over there. There's no political content to the thing. As of yet, that doesn't mean that somebody isn't going to either find it or make it up and put a political content on it later if they want to use it for something, and that's what we always have to be ready for and ready to answer them. Now the two young men who are involved, one of whom was killed last night, they say in a shootout. Police was killed. One of the police at the MIT was killed, and there was a gunfight, and he was shot many times and blown up. But the younger brother, the two brothers, they got away. They're supposed to be a Chechenian. Chechnya is a small population. It's not in. I guess it's like it was part of Russia, but it's in the Caucasus, which is between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. It's right north of Georgia, and it has a history because even during the time of the Soviet Union, during the Second World War, there was an independence movement in Chechnya that allied with the Germans, and the population was deported by the Soviet government at the time, and then they came back in the 50s, and then there was two civil wars in the early 90s and then later on in the 90s of Chechens against Russia, and the Chechnyan movement carried out some terrorist acts in Russia, blowing up. The most dramatic one was one where they had a bunch of people in a was a schoolroom, right? They had like 1,000 kids in the school, and about 400 kids wound up getting killed. What was that?
Poison gas in the theater.
That was a different one. That was a second. That was one earlier, where they had captured people in the theater, but then the government went in and used poison gas to subdue them, and a lot of people were killed. But I mean, it was never a really progressive movement, to say the least, in Chechnya. But I don't know that has anything to do with what happened in Boston. I'm just saying this because people are wondering, what's Chechnya, you know? What it has anything to do, there's nothing I shouldn't say nothing, but there's no strong indication that something that happened in Chechnya, which was mainly a nationalist movement more than a religious one, would necessarily affect why you would do something in the United States. So, as of now, there's no clear political rationale to the thing. Now, the comrades in Boston, I mean, they told us already on Monday, I guess it was, or Tuesday, that about the 3 deaths, 176 injuries. The lockdown was in full swing at the site. They're having trouble with using telephones, and that has continued. And it's continued up to, as we said today, where you have movements of troops all over the place with automatic weapons and people going through town. I mean, the town is under siege. It's like, one of the comrades said on the picket line today to me, it's like, this is what a coup would look like if there was if it was national. Let me go to another comparison on it. Oh, another thing I want to say. As I said, the media, there's the media that gives sort of the government position, which was sort of very cautious this week about who did it and why and stuff like that. And then there was the other media, the right-wing media, which was completely disgusting. And they would grab something, there was some report that a dark-skinned person did it, and all of a sudden the CNN and the Post and Fox News and stuff like that were running with that and blasting, and then they had to back off from it later on. And then the Post did it again. They published a picture of some poor kid who's not, he wasn't Saudi, he was Moroccan, I think. There was, the first one was some Saudi guy was injured and was being questioned. Of course, he's questioned. Anybody who's injured, you get questioned. But
yeah, but they went to his apartment and searched his apartment.
Right. Well, that's something. That's the police. Let me do the media first.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Because they had this other guy. They published this picture, some 17-year-old kid who went to run in the race. And he went down to the police to explain, it wasn't me, I didn't do it, I didn't do anything. Luckily, nothing happened to him. But he all of a sudden he saw his picture on being bandied about the whole world, sort of blaming him for the bombing. So there's always this danger of running away with fascist, racist, and also anti-Muslim. Having and that, of course, is still a danger, since the two young men may be Muslims. Although, as I said, there's nothing on that site that says, I'm Muslim, I'm going to revenge, whatever. There's plenty of things to be avenged that you might feel worthwhile being avenged. Although doing it this way is never helpful, and probably what happened at the World Trade Center was the worst single event from our class point of view since the collapse of the Soviet Union. But now, let me get to the other thing that I wanted to pick out. Obama, we used this in our editorial this week, because Obama said, anytime bombs are used to target innocent civilians, it is an act of terror. Obama gives orders for these things even. You can't even blame it on, the bad advisors or something like that, like in some cases. But the United States, U.S. imperialism, and its war machines, and especially in the last 10, 15 years, has carried on such horrendous anti-civilian attacks. Not only the drones, which of course not only kill people, but when they kill people, when they kill a bunch of people, when they kill a bunch of kids, what happens is the parents say, I'm not sending my kids to school anymore. We'll keep them in the house. Otherwise they're going to get killed by the, So it disrupts all of life in Pakistan. Then of course there's Iraq. The United States invaded and occupied Iraq for 10 years. And because they could not militarily defeat the resistance, they found a way, they manipulated different groups against each other so that Iraqis were killing each other. It still goes on. Every week something goes on in Baghdad where something happens like it happened in Boston, or worse. And this is the fault of U.S. imperialism. This did not happen under Saddam Hussein, whatever other problems he may have had.
That's right.
And their entire life is, not to mention now what happened in Libya, with the NATO bombings, what's going on now in Syria, which is an opposition, which includes people that Obama would probably call terrorists, and may still someday in the future call terrorists, but is now being armed by the United States. So they are responsible for this, suffering for this terror against civilians through the world, and they have created an atmosphere where this is part of what happens. So even where, when I don't want to be light-minded about this, but there are a lot of people growing up have problems. They do drugs, they get into trouble, they do things, but it depends on the atmosphere how that trouble may be carried out. And if the atmosphere is one where people are being bombed and killed on a regular basis, that may be something that happens too. Anyhow, I would blame imperialism for all of the events, including what happened in Boston, even though we don't know what the machinations of it is. And we have to find a way. It's difficult because they have the 99% of the media to argue against this. We have Workers' World, and this is good for us. It can keep us strong, and it keep our friends strong, and that's important because you have to start somewhere. But we have a hard fight ahead of us. But we have to be solid, and we have to condemn the imperialist wars. We have to condemn the actions of the Obama administration as well as the Bush administration and the rest that have been responsible for setting up a climate of terror throughout the world.
Yes.
And we have to organize and realize that in the end, what we have to take on is this same state that looks so powerful in Boston today. But I am confident that we can find within it and forces in this society that can tear it apart and can take over and bring about a society that is peaceful, and when nobody runs and does something like blows up people running in a race somewhere and thinking that that's a political statement, and I don't even know if anybody even thinks that it is. And but the main thing now is for us to learn the lessons of it here and see how do we go in a day-by-day response to it. I'm glad we're going right out there tomorrow demonstrating against the drones and against U.S. imperialist war and not letting this stop us from taking action. Thank you. I didn't want to give the impression that the World Trade Center attack was of the same world historic significance as the defeat of the Soviet Union, which, although we hope it's a temporary setback for the socialist movement, it's not just something that goes away after a couple of years. It's something that's with us and is part of the ideological struggle that makes it harder now, is that we have to overcome this real defeat. What the attack on the World Trade Center did is it gave the ruling class, the imperialist ruling class in the United States, a chance to mobilize, to get all themselves together around the very reactionary political program of the Bush administration at the time. It stirred up a lot of patriotism that hadn't really existed before. And, you know, people joined the military and probably joined intelligence organizations and stuff that, who otherwise might not have done that. And it, you know, it created a wave that certainly lasted a few years until the Iraq War started to drag down against it. And still is the key ideological thrust of the ruling class here is to mobilize against terrorism, against Islamic, even though they also manipulate with them in other parts of the world. So it's, and even though I don't believe that it was staged, I believe that they took advantage of it. Okay.